I used to work night shift at a hospital in Ohio. I'm not going to say which one because I still know people there, and I don't want to get anyone in trouble. But it was one of those older buildings, built in the 60s, lots of renovations over the years, hallways that don't quite make sense when you look at the floor plans. I was a CNA back then, mostly doing vitals and helping patients to the bathroom. The third floor was our long-term care unit. People who were stable but couldn't go home yet, stroke recovery, bad falls, that kind of thing. It was usually pretty quiet up there after midnight. Most patients slept through the night, and we had this routine where we'd do rounds every 2 hours, just peeking in, making sure nobody had fallen or pulled out their IV. So this particular night, I'm doing my 2 a.m. rounds. The hallway lights were dimmed like always. I'm walking past room 312, and I glance at the door monitor. The little box that shows if the door is open or closed. It says the door is ajar. But when I look at the actual door, it's shut tight. I figure the sensor is glitching. Happens all the time in that old building, and I keep walking. I get to the end of the hall, turn around, and start heading back. That's when I notice something wrong. The room numbers on my left go 310, 312, 314, but on my right, they go 311, 30, 35. There's a door between 3112 and 3014 that I swear wasn't there before. It doesn't have a number. It doesn't even have a proper handle. Just this old metal latch, like something from a supply closet. I stop and stare at it for a second. I know this hallway. I've walked it 100 times. There was no door there. I would have noticed. But I'm tired. It's 2 in the morning and maybe I'm just confused. I decide to check the patient roster on my phone. The app we use shows a map of the floor. I pull it up, and sure enough, between 312 and 314, there's just a wall. No door, no room. But I'm standing there looking at a door. I should have walked away. I know I should have. But something about it, the way it seemed to fit too perfectly in that space, like it had always been there, and I was the crazy one, made me reach out and touch the latch. It was cold. Not metal cold, but wrong cold, like touching something that had been in a freezer. My fingers actually hurt from it. I didn't open it. I pulled my hand back and practically ran to the nurse's station. The RN on duty was this woman named Patricia, been there for like 30 years. I tell her what I saw, and her face goes completely white. She doesn't say anything for a long time. Then she tells me to go take my break early and not to go back down that hallway for the rest of the night. I pressed her on it later, after shift change. She didn't want to talk about it, but eventually she told me that before the renovation in 2008, there was a room there, room 313B. They had closed it off after an incident. She wouldn't say what, just that the door was supposed to be gone, bricked over. And if I ever saw it again, I was to walk away and find her immediately. I worked there for another 6 months before I transferred to a different floor. I never saw the door again. But sometimes, when I'm walking that hallway at 2 a.m., I catch myself looking at the wall between 340 and 314, wondering if I'm going to see that metal latch. Wondering what would have happened if I'd opened it. Because here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. When I touched that latch, I heard something on the other side. Breathing. Heavy, wet breathing. And then a voice, barely a whisper, said my name. My full name. First and last. Clear as day. Nobody on that floor knew my last name. I was just Mike to the patients. Mike, the CNA. But whatever was behind that door knew exactly who I was. This happened when I was doing my clinical rotations in nursing school. I was placed at this hospital in rural Pennsylvania again, not naming names, but it was the only hospital for like 40 miles, so everyone in 3 counties ended up there eventually. Old building, constantly understaffed, the kind of place where you learn fast or you quit. I was on the surgical floor, which meant I was dealing with post-op patients. Lots of monitoring, pain management, making sure nobody was bleeding internally. The shifts were 12 hours, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and by 3 or 4 in the morning, your brain starts doing weird things. I kept telling myself that's what this was. My brain. Doing weird things. The surgical floor was on the 5th floor. The morgue was in the basement. This is important. When someone died on the floor, and it happened, not often, but it happened, we had to call the morgue, and they'd send someone up with a gurney. But sometimes, if the morgue attendant was busy or if it was the middle of the night, we'd have to transport the body down ourselves. There was a service elevator at the end of the hall, old and slow, that went directly to the basement without stopping at other floors. I had done it once before, during day shift when I was shadowing a nurse. It's not like the movies. There's no sheet over the face, no dramatic music. It's clinical. Respectful, but clinical. You wheel the gurney down, you take the service elevator, you sign some paperwork, you help transfer the body to a drawer. Then you go back to work. That's it. So this night, we lost a patient. Older gentleman, heart surgery, didn't make it through the night. The family had left around midnight, and he passed about an hour later. The nurse I was working with, let's call her Sarah, asked if I wanted to help her take him down. I said yes because I wanted to be helpful, and also because I didn't want to seem like the student who couldn't handle the hard stuff. We got him on the gurney, covered with a clean white sheet up to his shoulders. Sarah checked his wristband. I checked the paperwork. Everything matched. We wheeled him down to the service elevator. The hallway was empty. It always was at that hour. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the squeak of the gurney wheels. Sarah hit the button for the elevator. We waited. The building was old, so the elevator took forever. While we were standing there, I happened to look down at the patient's face. He looked peaceful, honestly, like he was sleeping. I didn't know him well. He'd only been on the floor for 2 days, but he seemed like a nice man. Quiet, polite. Always thanked us when we brought his meds. The elevator dinged. The doors opened, and there was a man inside. He was standing in the corner, facing the wall, just standing there, in a dark suit, hands at his sides. I couldn't see his face. Sarah and I both froze. The service elevator wasn't supposed to stop at other floors. It was supposed to come directly from the basement when we called it. But here was this man, just standing there, facing the corner like a kid in timeout. Sarah recovered first. She said, "Sir, are you getting off?" The man didn't move, didn't speak, didn't acknowledge us at all. I should mention, the elevator was large, designed for moving beds and equipment. There was plenty of room for our gurney even with him in there. But something about the way he was standing, the absolute stillness of him, made my skin crawl. I didn't want to get in that elevator. I wanted to wait for the next one, or take the stairs, or just stand in that hallway forever. But Sarah was already pushing the gurney forward. She was tired, I think. We were all tired. She just wanted to get this done and get back to the floor. So I helped her maneuver the gurney into the elevator, and I hit the button for the basement. The doors closed. The elevator started moving. And that was when I realized something that made my blood turn to ice. The man wasn't breathing. I don't mean he was holding his breath. I mean there was no movement in his chest, no sound of respiration, nothing. He was just standing there, perfectly motionless, facing the corner. And the smell. I hadn't noticed it at first, but now it hit me. Sweet and thick and wrong, like flowers left in a vase too long, mixed with something metallic underneath. I looked at Sarah. She was staring straight ahead, jaw clenched, knuckles white on the gurney handle. She felt it too. Whatever this was, she felt it. The elevator stopped. The doors opened onto the basement hallway. The morgue was to the left, about 20 feet down. Sarah practically shoved the gurney forward, and I stumbled after her, not daring to look back. We got the body transferred, signed the paperwork with shaking hands, and took the stairs back up to the 5th floor. 8 flights. We didn't say a word to each other until we were back at the nurse's station. I asked her who that was. The man in the elevator. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I don't know, but I've seen him before, always on that elevator. Always when we're transporting someone." She'd been at that hospital for 5 years. She said she'd seen him maybe 6 or 7 times. Always the same. standing in the corner, facing the wall, wearing that dark suit, never breathing, never moving. Sometimes he was there when the elevator opened. Sometimes he appeared while they were riding down, the doors opening on a floor that should have been empty, him just stepping on like he belonged there. I asked her why she never reported it, why she kept using that elevator. She looked at me with these exhausted, hollow eyes and said, "Because he's never done anything. He just stands there. And if I start reporting things like that, they'll think I'm crazy, or they'll find a reason to fire me. So I don't look at him. I get in, I get out, I go back to work. I finished my rotation 2 weeks later. I never saw the man myself. Not again. But I believed Sarah. I still believe her. Because I know what I saw in that elevator. I know what I didn't hear. No breathing, no shifting of weight, no sound of fabric moving. Just silence and that terrible smell. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he'd turned around, if we'd seen his face. I'm glad I don't know. I'm glad I'll never know. But if you ever work at a hospital with a service elevator and you call it from the basement and the doors open on someone standing in the corner, don't get in. Just wait for the next one. Please, wait for the next one. I need to preface this by saying, I don't work in healthcare anymore. I left, and I got a job in medical billing, which pays less and is boring as hell. But I don't have to walk into that building anymore. I don't have to take that elevator to the 4th floor. I don't have to hear those sounds. I was a pediatric nurse for 4 years. I loved it, mostly. Kids are resilient in ways that adults aren't. They can be so sick, in so much pain, and still find a way to laugh or play or ask you about your day. It made the hard parts worth it. The codes, the deaths, the parents who screamed at you because they were scared and you were the closest target. The kids made it worth it. Our pediatric unit was on the 4th floor. We had 20 beds, divided into 4 pods of 5 rooms each. The rooms at the end of the hall rooms, 420 through 424, were always the last to fill up. They were fine rooms, same as the others, but there was something about that end of the hall. The lights seemed dimmer. The temperature was always a few degrees cooler. Parents would complain about it sometimes, ask to be moved closer to the nurses' station. We always accommodated when we could. I worked night shift exclusively. I liked it better, fewer administrators, fewer family members, just me and the kids, and the quiet. I got to know my patients really well on nights. I'd sit with them when they couldn't sleep, read to them, hold their hands through bad dreams. It felt important. It felt like I was actually helping. The first weird thing happened about 6 months into my time there. I was doing rounds, checking on a little girl. She was maybe 7, in for pneumonia. She was awake when I came in, sitting up in bed, staring at the corner of the room. I asked if she was okay, if she needed anything. She didn't look at me. She just pointed to the corner and said, "Why is that boy crying?" I looked. There was nothing there. Just the chair where her mom had been sitting earlier and the wall with the window. I told her there was no one there, that she was probably just dreaming. She shook her head, still not looking away from the corner. "He's been crying all night. He says his mom left him here and she's not coming back. He wants his red truck." I got chills. Actual chills, running down my spine. I managed to get her settled down, convinced her to lie back and try to sleep. I checked the corner again before I left. Empty. Just shadows. The next night, I asked the other nurses if anyone had died in that room recently. They looked at me funny. "No deaths in weeks," they said. Why? I didn't tell them. I felt stupid. Kids say weird things. She probably dreamed it or saw a shadow and her brain filled in the rest. But then it happened again. Different room, same end of the hall. A 9-year-old boy, in for appendicitis recovery. I found him sitting up in bed, talking to someone. He was having a full conversation, whispering, nodding, like someone was sitting right there on the edge of his bed. When I came in, he looked at me and said, "He says you can't see him because you're too old. Only kids can see him." I asked who he was talking to. He said, "The boy who lives here." He's been here a long time. He likes to play, but he's sad because he can't find his mom. I started keeping a log after that. Not official, just notes in my phone. The kids in rooms 420, 424 saw him most often. A boy, they said. Around 10 years old. Sometimes crying, sometimes just standing there, sometimes wanting to play. He never hurt anyone. He was just there, watching, waiting. The older nurses knew about it. They didn't talk about it openly, but if you pressed them, they'd admit that something was off about those rooms. They'd had kids refuse to sleep with the lights off. Kids who'd asked to be moved in the middle of the night, terrified, unable to explain why. One nurse told me that 20 years ago, before the renovation, there had been a fire on that end of the hall. A child had died. They'd rebuilt, remodeled, tried to make it nice and new. But some things don't go away with construction. I saw him once. Just once, in 3 years of working there. It was around 3 a.m., the dead hour, when even the sickest kids are usually asleep. I was restocking supplies in room 422. The room was empty. The patient had been discharged that afternoon, and housekeeping hadn't come through yet. I was alone. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Light, quick, like a child running. I figured it was one of the ambulatory patients, maybe headed to the playroom or looking for a snack. I stepped out into the hall to check. There was a boy standing by the window at the end of the corridor. He was wearing pajamas, old-fashioned ones, the kind with feet, blue with faded stripes. He wasn't transparent or glowing or any of the things you expect from ghosts in movies. He looked solid, real, except for his face. I couldn't see his face. It was just blurred, like someone had smudged a photograph. He turned toward me. I couldn't see his eyes, but I knew he was looking at me. I could feel it, this heavy, sad attention. Then he raised his hand and pointed down the hall, toward the stairwell. He didn't speak. He just pointed. I should have run. I should have called security, called a priest, called anyone. But I was frozen. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there while this blurred-faced child pointed at the stairwell door. Then the alarm went off. A real alarm, a code blue in room 415. The sound snapped me out of it. I turned toward the alarm, and when I looked back, he was gone. I ran to 415. It was one of my kids, a 4-year-old with congenital heart defects. He'd gone into arrest. We worked on him for 40 minutes. 40 minutes of compressions and meds and begging him to come back. He didn't make it. Later, after the family had been called and the body had been taken away, I found myself back in that hallway. The stairwell door was propped open. Someone had forgotten to close it properly. I walked over to close it, and I saw something on the floor just inside. A toy truck. Red, plastic, covered in dust like it had been there for years. I picked it up. There was a name scratched into the bottom, faded but legible. Tommy. I still have it. I don't know why I kept it. I should have thrown it away, or left it there, or done something normal. But I put it in my bag and I took it home, and it's sitting in a drawer in my bedroom right now. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I hear what sounds like wheels on hardwood, like a toy truck being pushed back and forth, by someone who just wants to play. I left that hospital 6 months later. I told them it was burnout, that I needed a change of pace. It wasn't a lie, exactly. I was burned out. But mostly, I was scared. Because that last night, my final shift, I was cleaning out my locker in the break room, and I found a piece of paper tucked into my coat pocket. A child's drawing, done in crayon. A stick figure in blue pajamas, holding hands with a taller figure with long hair. Above them, in shaky letters, "Thank you for playing with me. Will you be my mom?" I don't have children. I've never had children. I don't know how that drawing got in my pocket, or when, or who put it there. But I know what I saw in that hallway. I know what those kids saw. And I know that whatever is in that pediatric wing, it's lonely. It's been lonely for a very long time. And it's still looking for someone to play with. Those were 3 disturbing true hospital night shift stories. If you work in healthcare and have experienced something you can't explain, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments below or send it to the email in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe. I post new true horror stories every week. Stay safe out there. And if you're working night shift tonight, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Good night.